The day had begun the way so many of my hikes do, with optimism heavy in my chest and a sky so clear it felt like an invitation. The first part of the trail was welcoming, the kind that makes you believe you're stronger than you are. Wide gravel paths, markers painted fresh on bark, the smell of pine carried sharp on the breeze. But as the hours passed, the character of the trail shifted. The ground began to tilt upward, and loose rock turned each step into a gamble. The cheerful sunlight filtered thin between thicker trees. I should have turned back, but there's a pride that comes with hiking alone, a refusal to admit weakness to yourself. At a fork in the trail, I chose left. There was no real reason, just a gut feeling. The path climbed steeper and narrower until it simply wasn't there anymore. The dirt faded into a scatter of stone, and when I looked back, the fork was gone too. I felt like I'd stepped through a crack in the forest that wasn't meant to be opened. Clouds moved in fast, as if they had been waiting for me to get lost. The woods grew dim, then gray, then a kind of premature night. I walked for what felt like hours until, through the undergrowth, I found it, a cabin. It leaned on its foundation like it had grown tired of standing. The roof sagged, and the door was half rotted, but it was shelter, and I had no other choice. Inside, the air was sour with mold. Furniture lay broken, collapsed against the walls. The floor sagged when I stepped on it, as though the cabin disliked the weight of strangers. My flashlight beam caught faint carvings in the wood, initials, maybe symbols, scored deep into the grain. The hearth was blackened, but the ashes inside looked too fresh, as if someone had been there not long ago. The night stretched long. Wind squeezed through the gaps in the walls, making the cabin groan like it remembered old pain. I tried to sleep, but each sound magnified until I swore I could hear footsteps outside. Once, I thought I heard a hand brush against the door. I didn't check. I didn't want to know. When dawn came, it felt like a reprieve. Pale light showed me a thin path beyond the cabin, a thread of dirt leading back into the trees. I followed it with something close to desperation until I stumbled onto a familiar marker. The relief was so sharp it hurt. By afternoon, I reached the road. My car sat waiting, a box of safety I thought I might never see again. I got in, locked the doors, and only when the engine rumbled to life did I dare look in the rearview mirror. At the edge of the treeline, something stood. A figure, dark and slim, its head tilted as though studying me. My first thought was human. My second thought was that it was too still, too patient. I blinked, and it was gone, dissolved back into bracken. But the image clung to me, as though the figure had imprinted itself into my memory. Weeks later, while cleaning my pack, I found a footprint pressed into the mud caked on the bottom pocket. It was small, childlike in size, but stretched too long, the proportions off. The print was real, pressed deep, impossible to dismiss as chance. I told myself stories. Maybe a child wandered here once. Maybe I was tired, hallucinating shapes. But every time I drive a dark road now, every time headlights wash over the trees, I feel it again, that same watching presence. The woods do not let you leave easily. Sometimes I think they assign something to follow you home, a sentinel of sorts. Something that remembers your name even when you try to forget theirs. The left turn. Solitude is a strange companion. For me, hiking alone had always been a kind of meditation. The crunch of my boots, the wind threading through pine needles, the silence. It was all I ever needed. That day was no different, or so I thought. The trail wound upward. Sunlight dappled across mossy stone. Hours passed, but instead of feeling weary, I felt alive. It's easy to believe you own the forest when no one else is there. Easy to think every path belongs to you. At a narrow bend, the trail forked, one way marked, one way hidden under roots and vines. I hesitated, then turned left. The new path was wild, less traveled. Branches clawed at my sleeves, soil loose underfoot. I felt like an explorer again, discovering something forgotten. But then the sound, a footstep, matched mine, perfectly. I stopped, The echo stopped. I moved again, slower this time. Behind me, leaves shifted in rhythm. I spun around. Nothing. Just empty trail, endless trees, the kind of silence that presses in too close. I tried to shake it off. Forests make sounds. Animals follow trails. But each step forward was shadowed by another step just out of sight. Faster. Slower. Always there. It was as though the forest itself had learned how to mimic me. By evening, I made camp. A small fire, the comfort of smoke, the illusion of safety. Yet even as I sat close to the flames, I heard it, pacing, just outside the circle of firelight. Footsteps shifting, halting, circling. I raised my flashlight, sweeping beams into the trees. Nothing. The sound ceased the moment I looked for it. The night was endless. My fire sputtered low. My eyes burned with exhaustion. Once, I swore I saw a figure crouched between the trees, limbs too long, head tilted sideways. I told myself it was fatigue. I told myself a lot of things. None of them helped. When dawn came, I stumbled back onto the marked trail, dizzy with relief. My legs shook as I walked, every muscle screaming for rest. Around midday, I crossed paths with two hikers. Their laughter felt alien, too loud, too human. I wanted to beg them not to leave me, but pride kept my mouth shut. At last, I reached my car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled away, forest shrinking in my rear view. Safe, or so I wanted to believe. That night, when I emptied my pack, I noticed it smeared with mud. At first, I thought nothing of it until I saw the print. A handprint, thin, narrow, pressed into the dirt. But the shape was wrong. The fingers were too long, stretched almost double the length of mine. It hadn't just followed me, it had touched me. And sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night, I swear I hear it again. That phantom rhythm, footsteps pacing just beyond the edge of the dark. The following steps. The trail was familiar. I had walked it dozens of times, each turn, each rise in the earth mapped into memory. It was supposed to be safe. That's why I liked it. Predictable, comforting. But that evening, something was different. The woods were hushed, quieter than I'd ever heard them. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals. Just stillness. Felt like stepping into a photograph, frozen and wrong. First, I ignored it. Boots crunching on the soil, backpack heavy on my shoulders. But soon I noticed it, another rhythm. Footsteps. They weren't behind me, not exactly. More like beside me, buried in the trees. Every time I slowed, the sound slowed. Every time I stopped, the sound stopped. I turned sharply, heart racing, but nothing moved. Nothing but trunks and branches, lined up like sentinels. The air grew heavy. My headlamp cast thin light, carving a path through the black. Shadows crowded in close, as though waiting for me to falter. I quickened my pace, but the steps matched, faster now. Then came the breathing. Not loud, not labored, just close, right behind my shoulder. The kind of sound you don't hear with your ears, but with your bones. I broke into a run, crashing through brush, lungs searing. My light swung wildly, catching glimpses, shapes between trees, legs that bent at angles wrong for a human stride. At last, the forest spat me into a clearing. Silence slammed down around me, thick and absolute. The kind of silence that hides something. I turned in circles, scanning tree lines, my pulse hammering. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, yet I felt it, watching, waiting. Somehow I found the path back. I don't remember the details, only that my legs carried me like a puppet yanked by strings. By the time I reached my car, I was sobbing, though I didn't know when the tears had started. That night, home in my bed, I should have felt safe, but I didn't, because when the house settled and the night stretched quiet, I heard it again. Step, step, soft, careful, right outside my window.